Let us begin by finding a place of comfort and stillness, allowing the body to settle into a gentle repose, and letting the mind drift away from the demands of the present day. We are going to take a journey, not to a place of noise or urgency, but to a quiet corner of the American Midwest, a place where the horizon stretches out in a long, unbroken line, and where history seems to hang suspended in the humid air. Close your eyes and imagine the rolling landscape of northwest Missouri. It is a tapestry of green and gold, woven together by fields of corn and soybeans that sway rhythmically in the summer breeze. Here, the earth is rich and dark, fed by the waters of the Nottoway River, which carves its winding path through the limestone and the loam. It is a peaceful geography, a place of wide open skies that turn a brilliant, bruised purple at twilight, and where the nights are filled with the chorus of crickets and the distant, lonely call of a train whistle. In the heart of this quiet valley lies the town of Skidmore. To understand what happened here, one must first understand the rhythm of the place itself. It is a small town, the kind of place that appears on the map as a mere dot, a collection of homes and buildings clustered together against the vastness of the fields. Time moves differently here, slower, heavier. The seasons dictate the pace of life, the planting in the spring, the waiting through the long, hot summer, the harvest in the fall, and the deep, silent hibernation of winter. Picture the main street as it might have looked decades ago, and as it still lingers in memory. It is a scene painted in shades of brick and dust. There is a sense of permanence to the old buildings, their facades weathered by years of sun and rain, standing as silent witnesses to the generations that have walked the sidewalks. The air here carries the scent of dry earth, of diesel from the farm trucks, and the sweet, heavy fragrance of cut grass. It is a place where everyone knows everyone, where the boundaries between families are blurred by years of shared history, and where a neighbor's business is often indistinguishable from one's own. In such a place, silence is a language all its own. There is the silence of the empty fields at dawn, when the mist clings to the ground like a soft blanket. There is the silence of the midday heat, when the sun beats down so fiercely that even the birds seek shelter in the shade of the oaks and maples. And then, there is a different kind of silence, the silence of things left unsaid, of secrets kept not by one person, but by a whole community, bound together by an unspoken pact. Our story takes us back to the summer of 1981, a year that feels distant now, filtered through the sepia tones of nostalgia. July in Missouri is a physical presence, a weight that settles on your shoulders. The humidity rises from the river bottoms, wrapping the town in a warm, damp embrace. The sun glares off the hoods of parked cars, and the asphalt radiates heat long after the sun has dipped below the horizon. In this small town of Skidmore, life revolved around the simple, daily rituals. The morning coffee at the local tavern, the trip to the post office, the gathering of supplies at the grocery store. It was a closed ecosystem, a world within a world. People relied on one another, not just for companionship, but for survival. When the snows came, or when the river rose, it was the neighbor down the road who would come to help. This reliance created a bond, a fabric so tight that it was almost impossible to tear. But within this fabric, there was a snag, a tension that had been building for years, slowly, incrementally, like the pressure in the air before a summer storm. It was not a sudden event, but a long, slow accumulation of moments, of glances exchanged, of whispers in the aisles of the store, of fear that had taken root and grown in the shadows of the town. Imagine the atmosphere of that July morning. The sky is a pale, washed-out blue, almost white with the intensity of the light. Dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight that pierce through the windows of the D&G Tavern. There is the sound of a ceiling fan turning lazily overhead, clicking with each revolution, stirring the stagnant air but offering little relief. Men in work boots and denim sit at the counter, their hands callous from labor, their voices low and murmuring. They talk of the crops, of the weather, of the price of grain, but beneath these ordinary topics, there is an undercurrent, a shared awareness of a problem that has no easy solution. For years, a shadow had been cast over Skidmore, a presence that disrupted the peace and challenged the order of this tight-knit society. It was a shadow that brought fear to the doorsteps of the quiet houses and made people lock their doors for the first time in memory. We are drifting through the memories of this town, observing the scene without judgment, simply feeling the texture of the moment. We see the dust settling on the gravel roads. We hear the tires crunching slowly as a truck turns the corner. We feel the collective heartbeat of a town that has been pushed to a precipice. It is rare, in the modern world, to find a story where a community acts as a single organism, where the individual voices merge into a collective will. But Skidmore was such a place. The isolation of the rural landscape fostered this unity. When you are miles from the nearest city, miles from the reach of outside authorities, you learn to handle things internally. You learn to look to your left and your right, to the people who have stood by you through droughts and floods, and you find your strength there. As the sun climbed higher on that fateful day, the tension in the town became palpable, like the static electricity that builds before a lightning strike. Yet, on the surface, everything appeared normal. The routine continued. The mail was delivered. The store opened its doors. But in the eyes of the residents, there was a look of determination, a silent acknowledgement that the waiting was over. There is a profound mystery in how a group of people, ordinary people living ordinary lives, can come to a point of no return together. It speaks to the deep, primal instinct of protection, of defending one's home and peace against chaos. It is a story as old as civilization itself, played out on the stage of a dusty Missouri street. As we visualize this setting, let us appreciate the stillness that surrounds the memory now. The events of that day have long since passed into history, becoming folklore, becoming a legend whispered in the surrounding counties. The anger and the fear have faded, leaving only the quiet aftermath. The buildings still stand, perhaps a bit more worn, and the wind still blows through the cornfields, rustling the dry stalks with a sound like hushed voices. We are walking slowly down the center of town in our mind's eye. The shadows are lengthening now, stretching out across the pavement. The heat of the day is beginning to break, replaced by the soft, cooling touch of evening. We can smell the ozone of a distant storm and feel the anticipation of the night. This is the stage for the story of Skidmore. Not a place of evil, but a place of human complexity, where the desire for peace collided with the reality of fear. It is a story of a silence that was chosen, a silence that was maintained with a discipline that is almost monastic in its severity. Let the image of the town settle in your mind, the water tower standing sentinel against the sky, the rows of houses with their porch lights flickering on, the vast darkness of the countryside pressing in from all sides. It is a world of quiet contemplation, a world where the past is never truly gone, but lives on in the quiet spaces between the words, in the stillness of the Nottoway Valley, waiting to be understood, waiting to be felt, in the calm, steady breathing of the night. As the last light of day fades into a deep, indigo bruise upon the horizon, we find ourselves drifting deeper into the story, moving from the general atmosphere of the town into the specific gravity of the events that defined it. The air here feels thicker now, heavy with the humidity of the river valley, and heavy with history. We are not just walking through a town anymore. We are walking through a memory, a collective memory that has been smoothed over by time, like a stone in a riverbed, yet remains hard and unyielding at its core. To understand the silence, one must first understand the noise that preceded it. For years, decades even, there was a discordance in this valley. It was not a sudden disruption, but a slow, grinding friction, the sound of metal on metal, the feeling of a machine that is slowly tearing itself apart. There was a presence here, a man named Ken Rex McElroy, though in the quiet of this night, names seem less important than the forces they represent. He was a force of chaos, a storm that refused to move on, hovering over the rooftops, casting a long, cold shadow, even in the brightest heat of summer. Imagine living in a house where the walls feel thin, where the locks on the doors feel insufficient, not because of the physical structure, but because of a psychological weight. This was the reality for the people of Skidmore. It was a life lived in the peripheral vision, always watching, always listening for the rumble of a specific truck engine, the crunch of tires on gravel, the sudden shift in the atmosphere that signaled danger. It was a fear that lived in the stomach, a tightening of the gut that became so familiar it was almost forgotten, simply accepted as the cost of living. It is a strange thing how the human mind adapts to stress, how the abnormal becomes normal if it persists long enough. We learn to walk softly. We learn to look down. We learn to make ourselves small to avoid the gaze of the predator. But even in the most patient of communities, even in a place where endurance is a virtue, there comes a breaking point. It is not a snap, but a shift, a realization that the current way of being is no longer sustainable. The catalyst for this shift was not a single moment of anger, but a gradual accumulation of helplessness. The law, the courts, the systems designed to offer protection, they seemed to evaporate like morning mist whenever they were reached for. Charges were filed and dropped. Handcuffs were placed and removed. The cycle repeated itself until the concept of justice felt like a fairy tale, a story told to children but abandoned by adults. The tension in the town grew taut, like a wire stretched across the valley. It vibrated with every new transgression. There was the incident at the grocery store, a place of commerce and community, violated by violence against an elder. It was a transgression that struck at the heart of the town's dignity, to hurt the old, to threaten the young. These are the acts that dissolve the social contract. And as the summer of 1981 approached, the heat rose, not just in the thermometer, but in the blood. Let us visualize that July morning. The sun is high and fierce, bleaching the color from the sky, turning the dust of the road into a fine, choking powder. The corn in the field stands tall and still, breathless in the humidity. There is a meeting called, not in secret, but in desperation. The men and women of the town gather at the Legion Hall. Picture the scene, the folding chairs, the scuffed floorboards, the smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke mingling with the sweat of anxiety. They did not gather as a mob, but as a community at the end of its rope. They were farmers, shopkeepers, neighbors. They looked at one another and saw their own exhaustion reflected in their friends' eyes. They spoke of legal avenues, of sheriffs and prosecutors, but the words rang hollow in the stifling air. There was a realization settling over the room, heavy and silent. They were alone. The world outside of Skidmore, the world of rules and order, could not reach them here. They were an island in a sea of corn, and the water was rising. The narrative tells us that the meeting ended without a clear plan, only a shared sense of inevitability. The group moved, almost as a single organism, flowing from the hall out into the blinding sunlight. They moved toward the center of town, toward the D&G Tavern, the place where the shadow had come to rest. It is here, in the bright glare of the midday sun, that the story becomes dreamlike. Time seems to slow down, stretching seconds into minutes. The Silverado truck is there, parked, a symbol of the tyranny that had held the town captive. Inside the tavern, the air is cool and dim. Outside, the heat is oppressive. The townspeople gather. They stand on the sidewalk. They stand by their cars. They are not shouting. They are not running. They are simply present. It is a tableau of waiting. The silence we spoke of earlier, it begins here. It is the silence of a held breath. It is the silence of the clouds pausing in the sky. When McElroy emerged from the tavern, the street was lined with faces he knew. Faces he had intimidated, faces he had mocked. But today, the eyes did not look down. The collective gaze of the town held steady. There is a power in witnessing, a power in refusing to look away. He moved to his truck. The engine turned over. The radio played. The ordinary sounds of a departure. But the departure would not happen. The shots, when they came, were not a barrage of chaotic noise. In the memory of the town, they are often described as sharp cracks, puncturing the heavy blanket of the afternoon heat. One, then another. They were precise. They were final. And then the silence rushed back in. It is profound how quickly the world changes. In the span of a heartbeat, a reign of terror ends, and a new burden begins. The burden of the secret. The truck sat still. The glass was shattered. The engine may have sputtered and died, or perhaps it was turned off, but the movement had ceased. The shadow that had loomed over the valley for so long vanished, dissipated by the bright, unmerciful light of the sun. Nobody ran. This is the detail that lingers in the mind, the stillness of the crowd. In a panic, people scatter. In a tragedy, people scream. But this was something else. This was a release. It was the moment the fever breaks. It was the moment the storm clouds finally open up and let the rain fall, washing away the dust, washing away the fear. The ambulance was called. The sheriff arrived. The rituals of the aftermath began to unfold. But the spirit of the event had already been sealed. The men and women who stood on that street, who saw everything and nothing, they looked at one another. No words needed to be spoken. A covenant was formed in that instant, lighter than air, but stronger than steel. We can see them now, in our mind's eye, slowly dispersing, the adrenaline fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, returning to their homes, to their porches, to the rows of corn that continue to grow, indifferent to the dramas of men. The sun began its descent, casting the long shadows of evening, just as it does now in our visualization. The town of Skidmore had acted, or perhaps the town of Skidmore had simply survived. The distinction is blurred, lost in the haze of that July afternoon. What remained was the quiet, not the quiet of peace, not yet, but the quiet of a vacuum, a space where a monster used to be, now empty, waiting to be filled by the consequences of the act. As we walk down this imaginary street, the pavement cooling under our feet, we can feel the weight of that decision. It hangs in the air like the scent of ozone. It is not a story of heroes and villains in the traditional sense. It is a story of pressure and release. It is a story of what happens when the social fabric is pulled so tight it tears, and the people are left to stitch it back together, with the only thread they have left: silence. The sun dips below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of violet and gray. The crickets begin their nightly chorus, a rhythmic, soothing sound that covers the land. The events of that day are etched into the pavement, etched into the brickwork of the buildings, but the town continues. It breathes, in and out. We are standing now by the edge of the main road, looking back at the silhouette of the town against the darkening sky. The violence is over. The gun smoke has long since cleared, but the mystery, the pact, the decision to close ranks against the outside world, that is just beginning. Let the image of the truck fading from view settle in your mind. Let the heat of that July day dissipate, replaced by the cool, forgiving touch of the night. We are safe here, observing from a distance, understanding the gravity without carrying the weight. The town sleeps, or pretends to sleep, holding its secrets close to its chest, like a precious, jagged stone. And as the stars begin to poke through the veil of the atmosphere, one by one, pinpricks of light in the vast canvas of the universe, we prepare to understand the aftermath. We prepare to explore how a moment of violence transformed into a lifetime of silence. But for now, just breathe. Feel the stillness. The storm has passed, and the night is yours. The dawn that follows such a day arrives slowly, hesitantly, as if the sun itself is unsure whether the ground below is ready for light. But come it does. The darkness recedes, pulling back like a tide, revealing the same streets, the same brick storefronts, the same wide, flat horizon of northwest Missouri. Yet the air has changed. The heaviness of the previous afternoon has lifted, replaced by a thick, impenetrable blanket of quiet. In the days that followed that July morning, the silence did not break. It deepened, it solidified, it became as tangible as the limestone beneath the soil. Outsiders arrived, as they always do when the fabric of the ordinary is torn. Men in suits with badges, reporters with cameras and notebooks, curiosity seekers drawn by the magnetism of the unknown. They came looking for answers. They came looking for a narrative, a straight line connecting cause and effect, crime and punishment. They walked the pavement where the glass had shattered. They stood in the shadow of the tavern. They knocked on doors that opened only a crack, or not at all. They asked their questions: who, how, why. But the town of Skidmore, this small cluster of lives bound together by geography and history, had made a choice. It was not a spoken choice, not a decree signed on paper. It was something older, something more primal. It was the instinct of the herd closing ranks, the collective breath held in unison. 46 witnesses, 46 pairs of eyes that might have seen the flash, the movement, the hand that held the weapon. And yet, when the questions came, the answers were soft, vague, and unified. They saw nothing. They heard only the chaos. They were looking away, or looking down, or blinded by the glare of the summer sun. It is a profound thing to consider, the power of a shared secret. It is a heavy stone to carry, but when carried by many hands, the weight is distributed. It becomes bearable. The legal machinery turned, grinding its gears. A grand jury was convened, a solemn gathering meant to sift truth from shadow. They sat in a room, listening to the voices of the town, but the story did not change. The wall did not crack. The prosecutor, the investigators, the media, they all pushed against that wall. They looked for the loose brick, the weak link, the voice that would tremble and break the pact. But there was no weak link. The town had become a fortress of silence. No one was indicted. No charges were filed. The law, which relies on words and testimony, found no purchase here. It slipped off the surface of Skidmore like rain off a tin roof. And so, the cameras eventually packed away their lenses. The reporters folded their notebooks, frustrated by the enigma, leaving behind headlines that called it the town of vigilantes, the town that got away with it. The satellite trucks drove away, their tires kicking up dust that settled back down onto the road, covering the tracks, restoring the stillness. Time, the great eroder, began its work. The seasons turned. The lush green corn of July turned to the brittle gold of October. The harvest came, the combines rolling through the fields like ships on a yellow sea. The winter snows fell, burying the main street in white, softening the edges of the buildings, muting the sound of passing cars. Spring returned with its rains, washing away the remnants of the past. Year after year, the cycle repeated. The sharp edges of the event began to dull. The anger, the fear, the adrenaline, it all faded into the background radiation of history. The physical landscape changed, slowly, inevitably. The grocery store, once the hub of daily life, eventually closed its doors, its windows gathering dust, becoming eyes that no longer saw. The tavern, where the men had gathered, changed hands, changed names, and eventually fell silent. And the DX station, that focal point, that stage where the final act played out, it could not stand against the march of time. The pumps were removed. The building, which had cast such a long shadow, was dismantled. The bricks were hauled away or crumbled into the earth. The ground was leveled. If you were to go there now, to stand on that spot in the quiet of a Tuesday afternoon, you would find nothing but empty space. The geography of the violence has been erased. There is no marker. There is no scar on the earth. There is only the wind, whistling through the gaps where buildings once stood. The people, the players in this tragedy, they too have faded. The man who cast the shadow is gone, buried under the Missouri soil. The men who stood by the truck, the women who watched from the windows, they have grown old. Many have passed on, taking their sliver of the truth with them to the grave. They held the line until the very end. They protected their town, their families, their peace, with a silence that was louder than any confession. And now, as we look back from the safety of the present, the urgency is gone. The need to know, to solve, to judge, it drifts away like smoke on the breeze. We are left only with the mood, the atmosphere of a small town settling in for the long night. Imagine the Skidmore of today, or perhaps the Skidmore of memory, suspended in a timeless twilight. The street lights flicker on, casting pools of amber light on the cracked sidewalks, the sound of a dog barking in the distance, the hum of a distant tractor, the rustle of leaves in the cottonwood trees. The mystery remains, but it is no longer a jagged thing. It has been smoothed by the river of time. It is just another story, woven into the quilt of the American Midwest, a patch of dark velvet amidst the denim and the calico. Let your mind wander away from the specific, away from the names and the dates. Let the details dissolve. Feel the peace that comes when a storm has finally exhausted itself. The air is cool and clean. The sky is a deep, endless indigo, scattered with stars that have looked down on this earth for billions of years, indifferent to our struggles, our secrets, our laws. Under that vast canopy, the town sleeps. The secrets sleep. The past sleeps. You can let go of the need to understand. You can let go of the need for resolution. Sometimes there is no neat ending. Sometimes the screen just fades to black, and the silence that follows is the only answer we are given. Breathe into that silence. Let it fill your lungs. Let it slow your heart. It is a protective silence, a warm silence. The trucks are gone. The shouts are gone. The fear is gone. There is only the gentle rise and fall of the land, the rolling hills stretching out in every direction, cradling the town in the palm of the earth. The road leads out of town, stretching into the darkness, a ribbon of gray disappearing into the night. We travel down that road now, leaving Skidmore behind. We watch the lights of the town shrink in the rearview mirror, becoming smaller and smaller, until they are just fireflies in the distance, and then they are gone. We are alone in the quiet dark, safe, detached, peaceful. The story is over. The book is closed. The weight is lifted. Drift now on the currents of the night. Let the stillness wrap around you. There are no more questions to be asked. There is nothing left to do. Just sleep. Good night.